Welcome to Mystery Manor Tales. I'm your host, Reginald Hawthorne. Tonight, we embark on a thrilling journey into the world of Agatha Christie-style intrigue with an original Hercule Poirot story titled Death of the Phantom Professor. Settle in with a cup of tea, dim the lights, and let the mystery unfold. This is a long tale, perfect for those cozy evenings. Over 90 minutes of deduction, twists, and classic whodunit charm. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more relaxing mysteries. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? Is it a rainy London evening, or perhaps a quiet countryside nook? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Shadowbrook Manor. The fog of London in late October 1927 clung to the streets like a conspirator, muffling the clop of hooves and the distant chime of church bells. It seeped through keyholes, curled around lampposts, and painted the windows of Whitehaven mansions with a soft grey veil. Inside apartment 203, a fire crackled with the precision of a metronome, its golden light dancing across shelves lined with leather-bound volumes, and the occasional glint of a silver trophy from some long-forgotten case. The air carried the faint scent of bergamot and hot buttered toast, Poirot's preferred breakfast blend. Hercule Poirot himself sat at a small mahogany table, his posture as immaculate as his reputation. A silk dressing gown of deep emerald hugged his compact frame, and his moustache, those twin masterpieces of symmetry, gleamed under the gaslight, like polished ebony. He held a letter opener of ivory and gold, slicing through the morning's correspondence with the reverence of a surgeon. Most envelopes were discarded with a flick of disdain. Bills, invitations to dull society functions, a plea from a duchess convinced her poodle had been kidnapped by anarchists. But one envelope made him pause. It was heavy, cream-laid paper, sealed with crimson wax impressed by a signet ring. A raven perched atop an open book, wings spread as if ready to take flight. The script on the front was elegant yet hurried, the ink slightly smudged as though written in haste. Poirot turned it over twice, his nostrils flaring with curiosity. He slit the seal with a satisfying snick. Poirot read the letter twice, then a third time, his fingers drumming a soft tattoo on the tablecloth. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. He reached for his tisane, chamomile with a whisper of honey, and sipped thoughtfully. "Tiens," he murmured. "A phantom professor, you say? Or perhaps a professor who fears becoming a phantom?" The door to the adjoining bedroom creaked open, and Captain Arthur Hastings emerged, hair tousled, tie askew, clutching a copy of the Times. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of honest face that inspired trust in juries and suspicion in card-sharps. "Morning, Poirot. Anything interesting in the post, or just more begging letters from bankrupt aristocrats?" Poirot handed him the letter without a word. Hastings read it aloud, his voice rising with each paragraph until he reached the part about the crimson ink. "Good Lord, sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. Phantom, curse, All Hallows Eve. Dash it all, Poirot. Are we seriously considering this? Mais oui, mon ami. Consider the psychology. A man of Professor Thorne's stature does not summon Hercule Poirot for a mere prank. No, no. There is fear here, real fear, seasoned with a touch of theatricality. And theatricality, Hastings, is the mask that guilt often wears." Hastings folded the letter and tapped it against his palm. "Still smells fishy. Cambridge Don, Egyptian curses, locked manors in the fog. Reminds me of that business in Styles, only with more cobwebs." Poirot's eyes twinkled. precisely why we must go. Besides the English countryside in autumn, magnifique, the leaves like flames, the air crisp enough to bite the lungs, and Shadowbrook Manor. I have heard whispers. A house built in the reign of Queen Anne, they say, with a library that rivals the Bodleian. One does not refuse such an invitation lightly. By 11 o'clock, arrangements were complete. Poirot's valet, George, packed a small valise with meticulous care. 3 suits, one for day, one for evening, one for unexpected eventualities, a dozen handkerchiefs starched to knife-edge precision, a tin of moustache wax, and, because one never knew, a compact revolver nestled in velvet. Hastings threw in a sweater, a revolver of his own, and a dog-eared copy of Bulldog Drummond for the train. They caught the 12:15 from Paddington, a first-class carriage smelling faintly of coal smoke and polished leather. Outside, London dissolved into watercolour smears of brick and slate. Poirot occupied himself with a small leather notebook, jotting observations in his neat slanted hand. Hastings stared out the window, occasionally muttering about ghosts and nonsense. "Tell me, Hastings," Poirot said suddenly, "what do you make of the seal? A raven on a book. Symbolism, nest surpass. Raven, death poe, all that rot. Book, knowledge, academia. Probably the professor's family crest. Or a warning," Poirot mused. "The raven is Odin's messenger, carrier of secrets. And books. Books conceal as much as they reveal." The train rattled on, past fields gilded with stubble, past villages huddled beneath church spires. At precisely 1:07, it pulled into the tiny station of Much Haddam, where a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom II awaited, its chrome gleaming like a smile. The chauffeur, a stoic figure in bottle-green livery, touched his cap. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Professor Thorne's compliments. This way, sirs." The drive to Shadowbrook took them down winding lanes, overhung with ancient oaks, their branches interlacing like the fingers of conspirators. The fog thickened, swallowing the world beyond the headlights. Every so often, a gatehouse loomed, stone, ivy-clad, abandoned, and Poirot caught glimpses of deer flickering through the mist like apparitions. At last, the manor revealed itself. A vast asymmetrical pile of weathered limestone, its windows glowing amber against the dusk. Turrets rose like sentinels. Gargoyles leered from the eaves. A gravel drive crunched beneath the tires as they approached the porte cochere. The front doors, massive oak bound with iron, swung open as if by invisible hands. They were greeted by a butler whose face might have been carved from the same stone as the house. Mr. Grimshaw was tall, gaunt, with eyes the colour of winter skies. "Welcome to Shadowbrook Manor," he intoned, his voice as dry as parchment. "The Professor is expecting you in the drawing-room. This way, if you please." The entrance hall was a cavern of shadows and splendour. A grand staircase swept upward, its banisters carved with scenes of medieval hunts. Suits of armour stood at attention, their visors blank and accusatory. Above, a chandelier of Venetian glass dripped light like melting ice. The air smelled of beeswax, old books, and something faintly metallic. Blood. No, Poirot decided, merely the tang of autumn rain on stone. Grimshaw led them through a corridor lined with portraits. Thorns in ruffs and doublets, Thorns in powdered wigs, Thorns in Victorian mourning. One painting caught Poirot's eye. A woman in emerald silk, her eyes following him with unsettling intensity. The late Mrs. Thorne, perhaps, he wondered. The drawing-room was a scholar's paradise. Bookshelves soared to the ceiling, accessible only by a rolling ladder of polished mahogany. Globes of the world and moon rested on pedestals. Cabinets displayed curiosities. A mummified hand, a shard of pottery inscribed with cuneiform. A crystal skull that seemed to pulse with inner light. A fire roared in a hearth, carved with grotesque faces. Above the mantel hung a portrait of Professor Thorne himself. Tall, ascetic, with wild white hair and eyes that burned with fanaticism. The professor rose as they entered, unfolding like a stalk. He wore a velvet smoking jacket the colour of dried blood, and his spectacles glinted as he extended a bony hand. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, you honour us. Come, warm yourselves. Grimshaw, brandy for our guests." The room's other occupants turned to stare. Poirot catalogued them instantly, his gaze sharp as a scalpel. Lady Victoria Ashford lounged on a chaise longue, a vision in claret silk. Her dark hair was bobbed in the latest fashion, and emeralds flashed at her throat. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Green, calculating, amused. Debts, Poirot thought. Gambling, perhaps, or something more exotic. Dr. Reginald Blackwood stood by the fireplace, a bear of a man with a beard like a bird's nest, and hands that could crush walnuts. His tweed suit strained at the seams. He nodded curtly, his scowl deepening. Rivalry, Poirot noted. Academic, professional, personal. Miss Eliza Cartwright hovered near her escritoire, clutching a leather-bound notebook as if it were a shield. She was small, bird-boned, with spectacles that magnified anxious eyes. Her dress was sensible brown, her hair pinned severely. Devotion, Poirot decided, unrequited perhaps. Mr. Jonathan Hale leaned against a window, young, handsome, restless. His archaeologist's boots were caked with mud, and a scar ran through one eyebrow like a lightning bolt. He flashed a grin that was all teeth. Ambition, Poirot thought, and secrets. Finally, Mrs. Beatrice Thorne sat apart, a faded rose in a chair of faded brocade. Once beautiful, now brittle, she sipped sherry with the precision of a surgeon. Her eyes, once violet, now washed out, fixed on her husband with icy contempt. Betrayal, Poirot mused, long festering. Professor Thorne clapped his hands. Now that we are all assembled, let us dine. Grimshaw, inform Mrs. Wilkins we are ready. Dinner was served in a dining room, panelled in dark oak, lit by candelabra that threw pools of gold across silver and crystal. The menu was exquisite. Consommé madrilène, sole meunière, roast pheasant with chestnut stuffing, a charlotte russe that melted on the tongue. Wines flowed, chablis, claret, a tokaji for dessert. Conversation was polite but barbed. Lady Victoria spoke of London parties. Dr. Blackwood grumbled about funding cuts. Miss Cartwright murmured about cataloguing papyrus fragments. Hale regaled them with tales of desert digs. Mrs. Thorne said little, her silence louder than words. Over coffee, Thorne leaned forward. "You wish to know about the phantom? Very well. It began 3 weeks ago. I was working late in my study, translating a Coptic text, when I heard footsteps in the corridor. Slow, deliberate, I opened the door. Nothing. But the air was cold, as if a window had been left ajar. The next night, the same. Then the shadows began. He described glimpses of a figure in a hooded cloak, always at the edge of vision. Books moved on shelves, a mirror cracked without cause, and always the scent of myrrh, funereal, ancient. I installed new locks, Thorne continued. Had Grimshaw searched the house? Nothing. Yet last night, he withdrew a slip of paper from his pocket. The ink was indeed crimson, the handwriting spidery. The phantom claims its due on All Hallows' Eve. Poirot examined it closely. The paper was handmade, expensive. The ink iron gall, but mixed with something else. Cochineal? Blood? He sniffed delicately. Neither, merely theatrics. And the amulet? He asked. Thorne hesitated, then rose. Come, I will show you. They followed him to the study, a corner room on the ground floor, its door reinforced with iron bands. Inside, chaos reigned in orderly fashion. Stacks of manuscripts, a human skull used as a paperweight, a brass telescope pointed at the stars. On the desk lay the amulet, a scarab of lapis lazuli, its wings spread, hieroglyphs carved into its back. It seemed to absorb the lamplight rather than reflect it. From the tomb of a priest of Thoth, Thorne whispered, "Said to bind the soul of its thief to the underworld. I acquired it from a dealer in Cairo." The moment it arrived, the disturbances began. Poirot lifted it with a silk handkerchief. Heavy, cold, the glyphs were genuine, but the stone? He tapped it gently. A faint hollow sound. Interesting. Hastings shivered. "Dash it, Poirot. Put it down. Gives me the creeps." Outside, the wind moaned through the chimneys. Somewhere, a shutter banged. The guests exchanged uneasy glances. As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot lagged behind, his eyes scanning the corridor. A Persian runner muffled their footsteps. Portraits watched. And there, beneath a suit of armour, a single red thread caught on a spur. He pocketed it without comment. Brandy was served. Conversation turned to alibis none had yet been asked to provide. Lady Victoria claimed a headache and retired early. Dr. Blackwood muttered about superstitious nonsense and stomped off to the library. Miss Cartwright fluttered away to finish some transcriptions. Hale lingered, pouring another drink, his eyes on the amulet's empty space on the desk. Mrs. Thorne drifted out like a ghost, her perfume, jasmine, and regret trailing behind. Poirot and Hastings were shown to adjoining rooms on the first floor. Poirot's was a study in crimson and gold, with a four-poster bed that could have slept a regiment. A fire burned low. On the bedside table lay a sprig of lavender and a note in the same crimson ink. "Sleep well, little detective. The phantom watches." Poirot smiled without humour. "Eh bien, the game, Hastings, has begun." Midnight found him awake, pacing in silk pyjamas, the amulet's weight in his dressing-gown pocket. He opened the window. Fog rolled in, thick as wool. Somewhere below, a door creaked. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, crossed the gravel. A shadow detached itself from the manor wall and melted into the trees. Poirot closed the window. "Tomorrow," he murmured, "we begin the hunt. For phantoms, mon ami, are merely men who have not yet been caught." In the darkness, the raven seal seemed to watch from the desk, its wings poised for flight. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Night. The house settled into the hush that only old manors know after midnight. Floorboards sighed under their own weight. Somewhere, a clock ticked with the patience of centuries. In the east wing, the fire in Poirot's grate had burned down to a nest of ember roses, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. He lay fully dressed beneath the crimson canopy, eyes open, ears tuned to every creak and murmur. The lavender sprig from the bedside table rested on the counterpane. Its scent mingled with the faint metallic tang that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Across the connecting door, Hastings snored with the steady rhythm of a man who trusted the world to wake him if it needed him. Poirot envied the gift. Sleep for him was a luxury earned only after every possibility had been weighed, measured, and filed away. At 12:07 a.m. before the ormolu clock on the mantel, the first anomaly arrived, a soft scrape, as though velvet brushed against wood. It came from the corridor, direction uncertain. Poirot rose without a sound, slipped his feet into patent leather slippers, and opened the door a finger's breadth. The gas sconces had been turned low, their flames wavered like wary sentinels. The runner, Persian, crimson, and indigo, stretched away into darkness. Nothing moved. He waited, counting heartbeats. At 12:11, the sound repeated, closer now, accompanied by the faintest rustle, silk on silk perhaps, or a woman's dressing gown. A door closed somewhere below, so gently that only a man listening for it would have noticed. Poirot stepped into the corridor. The air was colder here, carrying the scent of myrrh and something sharper, ozone after lightning. He moved with the silence of a cat, fingers trailing the wainscot, eyes adjusting to the gloom. At the top of the grand staircase he paused. Moonlight spilled through the stained glass lancet, painting the marble steps in bruised purples and blood reds. Halfway down, a single footprint marred the dust, small, narrow, the print of a woman's evening shoe. He descended. The entrance hall yawned beneath him, vast and watchful. The chandelier swayed, though no wind stirred. Poirot's gaze swept the shadows. Suits of armour, the long refectory table still bearing the silver epergne from dinner. The closed doors to drawing room, library, study, all silent. Then from the study, a thud, muffled, deliberate, a book falling, a body. Poirot crossed the hall in 6 precise strides. The study door, heavy oak banded with iron, stood ajar by an inch. A ribbon of lamplight lay across the runner like a golden blade. He pushed the door wider. The room was empty, yet not empty. The desk lamp burned low, throwing a circle of amber over scattered papers. An inkstand, the brass telescope now angled toward the window. The amulet was gone from its velvet cushion. In its place lay a single raven feather, glossy black, its tip stained crimson. Poirot's nostrils flared. The myrrh was stronger here, almost cloying. He stepped inside, senses alert. The windows were latched from within, curtains undisturbed. The fireplace held only ash. No secret panel gaped. He had checked earlier. Yet the air felt disturbed, as though someone had passed through moments before. He knelt, examined the feather under the lamp. Not raven, he realized, crow. The barbulures were coarser, the vein less symmetrical. A subtle difference, but to Poirot, a shout. Someone wished to evoke the professor's seal without precision. Amateur theatrics, or deliberate misdirection? A floorboard creaked behind him. He whirled, hand slipping into his pocket for the compact revolver George had packed. But it was only Hastings, hair wild, revolver in hand, eyes wide. "Poirot!" "Heard a noise. Thought it better. Dash it. What's happened?" "Shoot, mon ami. Lower the weapon before you alarm the house." Poirot indicated. "The feather. Our phantom has paid a visit. The amulet is taken. A calling card left. Observe the footprints in the hall. Women's, size 4, perhaps 5. And listen. They stood in silence. From the upper landing came the soft pad of bare feet, retreating. A door closed far away. Hastings exhaled. "Ghosts don't leave footprints, Poirot." "Precisely. Nor do they steal Egyptian scarabs. Come, we must rouse the professor." They climbed the west staircase, Hastings' heavier tread echoing. The professor's suite occupied the entire corner of the wing, a heavy door of carved mahogany, locked. Poirot knocked, sharp, authoritative. No answer. He knocked again, louder. "Professor Thorne! It is Poirot! Open, I beg you!" Silence. Then, faintly, a groan. Hastings put his shoulder to the door. "Locked from inside, dash it!" Poirot's eyes swept the frame. No key in the lock. He knelt, peered through the keyhole. Darkness, but a sliver of light beneath the inner door, the bedroom. Another groan, weaker. "Stand back!" Hastings raised his revolver, but Poirot stayed his hand. "Non, non. We break only as last resort." The corridor window, there, overlooking the balcony. They hurried to the window at the corridor's end. It opened onto a narrow stone balcony, encircling the wing. Fog swirled below, thick as soup, but the balcony was dry. Poirot leaned out. The professor's bedroom window stood open 6 inches, curtains billowing like surrender flags. Quickly. He swung a leg over the sill, compact and agile despite his years. Hastings followed, muttering about rheumatism. They edged along the balcony, stone-cold beneath their slippers, until they reached the open window. Inside, moonlight silvered a scene of chaos. Professor Thorne lay sprawled across his bed, nightshirt soaked crimson at the back. A dagger, antique, with a hilt of chased silver, protruded between his shoulder blades. His eyes stared sightless at the canopy. One hand clutched a crumpled sheet of paper. The room smelled of blood and myrrh, and the faint, acrid bite of fear. Poirot climbed through, pulse steady. Do not touch the body. Hastings, the window, was it forced? Hastings examined the catch. Latched from inside, but the paint is fresh, no scratches. Could have been opened and closed again. Poirot knelt beside the bed. The dagger was from the study's display. He recognized the hilt, a 16th-century Italian piece Thorne had boasted of at dinner. The blade had entered cleanly, just left of the spine, severing the aorta. Death would have been swift, within minutes. No sign of struggle, no overturned furniture, no defensive wounds visible on the professor's hands. The crumpled paper was another note. Same crimson ink, same spidery hand. Beneath the bed, a single drop of blood still wet, leading toward the door. Poirot followed the trail with his eyes. It stopped at the threshold, where the carpet began. No further drops. Curious, he stood. The professor was stabbed here, in his bed. Yet the study was ransacked. The amulet, taken. 2 crimes, or 1 elaborate tableau. And the door, locked from within, the key. He crossed to the door, examined the lock. The key was in it, on the inside. He turned it. The bolt shot home with a click. Then he withdrew the key, pocketed it. We must summon the household, but carefully. No panic. They returned via the balcony, Hastings closing the window behind them. In the corridor, Poirot paused at each guest room, listening. Lady Victoria's door, silence. Dr. Blackwood's, a faint snore. Miss Cartwright's, the rustle of bedsheets. Hale's, nothing. Mrs. Thorne's, the soft creak of a rocking chair. Poirot knocked on Grimshaw's pantry door, just off the main stairs. The butler appeared instantly, fully dressed, as though he had never slept. His face remained impassive, but his eyes flicked to the blood on Poirot's dressing gown, unmissable. Professor Thorne is dead, Poirot said quietly. Murdered. Fetch the local constable, but first assemble everyone in the drawing-room. No one is to enter the professor's suite. Grimshaw inclined his head. At once, sir. He moved with the efficiency of a man born to crisis. Within 10 minutes the household gathered. A tableau of nightgowns and suspicion. Lady Victoria, wrapped in a peacock silk kimono, eyes red-rimmed, though whether from sleep or tears was unclear. Dr. Blackwood, in a tartan dressing-gown, face thunderous. Miss Cartwright, clutching a wool shawl, trembling. Jonathan Hale, barefoot, shirt unbuttoned, knuckles bruised. Mrs. Thorne, regal in black velvet, a single diamond brooch at her throat, expression unreadable. Hastings stood by the door, revolver discreetly lowered. Poirot took centre stage before the cold hearth. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice calm, a tragedy has occurred. Professor Thorne has been stabbed in his bed. The door was locked from within, the windows latched, yet the dagger came from the study, and the amulet is missing. We have, it seems, an impossible crime. Gasps rippled. Lady Victoria pressed a hand to her mouth. Uncle Elias? No. Dr. Blackwood's scowl deepened. Locked room! Preposterous! Someone must have a key. Miss Cartwright whimpered. The phantom! It's real. Hale's eyes darted to the windows, where fog pressed like a living thing. Mrs. Thorne said nothing, but her fingers tightened on her brooch. Poirot raised a hand. Speculation is useless. Facts only. Grimshaw, you brought the Professor his nightly tisane at what hour? 10 o'clock precisely, sir. He took it in the study, then retired. I locked the front door at 11, checked all windows. The house was secure. And you, Lady Victoria, where were you at midnight? In my room, reading. I heard nothing. One by one, alibis were given, flimsy as tissue. Dr. Blackwood claimed to be asleep. Miss Cartwright was writing letters. Hale said he walked the gardens to clear his head. Mrs. Thorne retired early with a headache. Poirot's gaze lingered on each face. The local constable will arrive soon. Until then, no one leaves this room. Captain Hastings will ensure it. He slipped away, returning to the Professor's suite with Grimshaw. The butler produced a master key, but Poirot waved it aside. Observe. He inserted the bedroom key from the inside, locked the door, then withdrew it through the gap beneath, using a bent wire from his pocket, a trick he had learned in Brussels long ago. The key clinked onto the carpet outside. Grimshaw's eyes widened a fraction. But the bolt, sir, it's a double bolt, can only be thrown from within. Poirot examined the bolt. Heavy iron, no exterior mechanism. Yet when he closed the door and looked through the keyhole, he saw the bedroom clearly. The killer entered, stabbed the Professor, locked the door, withdrew the key, then he opened the door again. The bolt was still thrown. Impossible to lock from outside. He stood back, moustache twitching. Unless... A soft thud from the corridor. Poirot spun. Miss Cartwright stood there, pale as milk, a glass of water trembling in her hand. I heard voices. Is it true? The Professor? Poirot took the glass gently. You should not be here, mademoiselle. Return to the drawing room. But as she turned, he noticed her bare feet, small, narrow, the soles stained with mud. And on her nightgown, a single red thread caught on the lace. He pocketed it without comment. Dawn crept in, grey and reluctant. The local constable, a stout man named Inspector Japp, no relation to Poirot's Scotland Yard friend, arrived with fog clinging to his moustache. He surveyed the scene, scratched his head, and declared it a rum-do. Poirot, meanwhile, examined the study again. The crow-feather was gone, replaced by a smear of blood on the desk, fresh. Someone had returned. On the blotter, a new note, same crimson ink. Poirot folded it carefully. The phantom, he murmured, is very much alive. And growing bold. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the manicured lawns, the topiary twisted into grotesque shapes, the woods beyond where something or someone moved between the trees. The house was awake now, humming with fear and suspicion. Breakfast was a silent affair. Toast untouched, coffee cooling. Poirot observed from the doorway, cataloguing glances, tremors, the way Hale's hand shook as he buttered bread, the way Mrs. Thorne's eyes never left the empty chair at the head of the table. At 8:15, Tommy the groundskeeper burst in, cap in hand, face white. "Sir, begging pardon, but there's footprints round the east wing, leading to the study window, then away into the woods, and blood, sir, drops of it like a trail." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "Show me." The footprints were clear in the dew-soaked grass. Men's boots, size 10, deep impressions, as though the wearer carried weight. They began at the study window, which was now unlatched, circled the house, and vanished into the tree line. The blood drops were small, widely spaced, already browning. Hastings knelt. Same as the bedroom? Perhaps, or another victim we have not yet discovered. Poirot's tone was grim. Back inside, he gathered the suspects once more. The net tightens. Someone entered the study after the murder, took the amulet, left the feather. Someone walked the gardens at dawn. Someone knows more than they say. Lady Victoria laughed, a brittle sound. "You're accusing us all, Monsieur Poirot. How dramatic. Drama is the murderer's tool, madame. I deal in truth." Dr. Blackwood slammed a fist on the table. "This is madness. The man was stabbed in a locked room. The amulet stolen, footprints appear. How do you explain it?" Poirot smiled. "Small and dangerous. I do not explain yet. I observe, and I observe that Miss Cartwright's feet are muddy, Mr. Hale's knuckles are bruised, and Mrs. Thorne's perfume lingers in the study, though she claims never to enter it." Silence fell, thick as the fog outside. Poirot turned to Grimshaw. "The Professor's will. Where is it kept?" "In the safe, sir. Behind the portrait in the library. Open it." The safe yielded a single document, sealed. Poirot broke the wax. The will was simple. Everything to Mrs. Thorne, should she survive him. A codicil, dated last week, left the amulet to the British Museum, with a bequest to Miss Cartwright of £5,000 for loyal service. Miss Cartwright gasped. Hale's face darkened. Poirot folded the will. "Motives, mes amis, they multiply like rabbits." As the morning wore on, the house seemed to hold its breath. Constable Japp tramped about, measuring, photographing, growing redder with each impossibility. Poirot retreated to the library, spreading clues across a table. The crowfeather, the red thread, the notes, the muddy footprints sketched by Tommy. Hastings paced. "It's witchcraft, Poirot. Has to be." "Non, mon ami, it is clockwork. Every gear turns for a reason. We have only to find the missing spring." At noon a scream shattered the silence, high, terrified, from the upper floors. They ran. Miss Cartwright stood in the Professor's bedroom, pointing at the bed. The dagger was gone. In its place, carved into the headboard with fresh, deep gouges. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. The scream still hung in the air when Poirot reached the Professor's bedroom. Hastings at his heels. Miss Cartwright stood frozen in the doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other clutching the jamb as though the floor might tilt. Her eyes, wide behind the thick lenses, were fixed on the headboard. The gouges were fresh, the wood pale where the knife had bitten deep. Each letter was 2 inches tall, jagged yet deliberate. The phantom never sleeps. Constable Japp lumbered up behind them, wheezing. "Now what in blazes?" Poirot silenced him with a raised finger. "Observe, Inspector. The dagger is removed, the message carved in its place. Our killer returns to the scene, bold as brass. And yet—" He stepped closer, nostrils flaring. No sawdust on the counterpane, no chips on the floor. The carving was done elsewhere. Then the board rehung. He ran a gloved finger along the edge. The headboard was oak, heavy, attached by 4 iron brackets. "Hastings, help me!" Together they lifted it down. On the reverse side, the letters were rough, splintered, clearly carved in haste. A faint smell of linseed oil clung to the wood. "Done in the workshop, perhaps," Poirot murmured. "Tommy the groundskeeper has a shed. We will look there later. For now, seal this room. No one enters without my say-so." Miss Cartwright swayed. "I only came for the Professor's spectacles. He asked me to polish them yesterday. I thought—" Her voice cracked. Poirot's gaze softened a fraction. "You thought to perform one last service. Come, mademoiselle, let us find you a chair and a brandy." He led her downstairs to the morning room, where sunlight struggled through the mullioned windows. Mrs. Wilkins, the cook, A stout woman with forearms like hams bustled in with a tray. Tea, brandy, shortbread still warm from the oven. Miss Cartwright accepted the brandy with trembling hands. Poirot waited until colour returned to her cheeks. "Now, tell me exactly what you saw." I opened the door. Nothing seemed ominous. Then I saw the headboard. The words, they weren't there last night, I swear. I helped Grimshaw strip the bed after they took the professor away. And the dagger? Still in him then? I couldn't look. She shuddered. Poirot patted her hand. "You have been brave. One more thing. The mud on your feet this morning. You walked in the gardens?" She flushed. I couldn't sleep. After you questioned us, I went to the rose arbor to think. The dew was heavy. Alone? Yes. No. I thought I heard someone behind me, but when I turned, nothing. Her voice dropped. Just the fog. Poirot filed it away. He dismissed her with instructions to rest, then turned to Hastings. "We begin the interviews, systematically, bring them to the library one by one." And Hastings, watch their hands. The blade that carved those letters will have left its mark. The library smelled of vellum and cigar smoke. Sunlight slanted through high windows, striping the turkey carpet in gold bars. Poirot took the leather chair behind the partner's desk. Hastings stood by the door. Notebook ready. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, seating herself without invitation, "this is intolerable. My uncle murdered, the house crawling with police, and now this melodramatic graffiti." "When can we leave?" "When the killer is caught, madame. Until then, indulge me. Last night, after you retired, did you remain in your room?" "I most certainly did. I have a headache powder, and a novel, the chic if you must know. Ghastly taste, but diverting. Alone?" A flicker of annoyance. "Naturally, my maid is in London." Poirot leaned forward. "Your debts, Lady Victoria, they are considerable?" Her chin lifted. "That is none of your affair. Murder makes everything my affair. Your uncle refused to advance you further funds, yes? The will leaves everything to his wife. You inherit nothing unless she predeceases him." Colour rose in her cheeks. I loved my uncle. He was eccentric, yes, but generous when it suited him. "If you're implying, I imply nothing. I state facts." He slid a sheet across the desk. Her IOUs, obtained by discreet telegram to his London solicitor. £50,000, madame. Enough to ruin a dukedom. She paled. "Where did you tell me about the red thread on your shawl last night? It matches one found near the study. I snagged it on a rose bush in the garden yesterday afternoon. Ask Tommy." Poirot made a note. "You may go. Send in Dr. Blackwood. This is harassment, Poirot. I've a paper to finish for the Royal Society, which your rival plagiarized, non? Professor Thorne claimed your research on the Thoth amulet as his own. You threatened him in print." Blackwood's fists clenched. "Academic disagreement, not murder. Yet you were seen near the study at 11:30 last night." "Grimshaw noticed your door ajar. I was fetching a book. Thorne kept the only copy of Masperis Dawn of Civilization under lock and key. I returned it at once. Your hands, Doctor." Poirot gestured. Blackwood's knuckles were scraped raw, the right index finger bandaged, wood carving perhaps. Splinter from the banister. This house is falling apart. Poirot let him go, unconvinced. Professor Thorne was everything to me. 20 years I served him. He promised— She stopped, eyes filling. "Promised you security. The will grants £5,000, a fortune to you, a pittance to him. Yet without it, you face destitution." She nodded miserably. "I would never harm him. Last night, you wrote letters. To whom? To my sister in Devon. And to Mr. Hale." Colour flooded her face. "Jonathan Hale, the protégé. We have an understanding." The professor disapproved. said Jonathan was ambitious, untrustworthy. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the mud on your feet? I told you, the rose arbour. I went to meet Jonathan. He never came. A tear slipped down her cheek. I waited until the church clock struck 1. Look, Poirot, I didn't kill the old man. He was my ticket to tenure at Cairo University. Dead, he's worth nothing. Except the amulet. Worth a fortune on the black market. You studied its provenance. Hale shrugged. I catalogued it, yes, but it's a fake. Lapis is wrong. Too uniform. Thorne paid 20,000 for a clever forgery. Poirot's moustache twitched. You told him this last week. He laughed, said the curse was real enough. Became paranoid. Started locking doors, writing those lunatic notes to himself. Notes? You saw him write them? Caught him at it once, in the study. Crimson ink, theatrical flourishes. Said it was to scare off rivals. Poirot leaned forward. And your bruised knuckles? Punched a tree. Frustration. The old man was cutting me out of the will. Said he'd been indiscreet with funds. Embezzlement, he called it. A few hundred for expedition costs. My husband was a brilliant man, Monsieur Poirot, and a cruel one. He married me for my fortune, then spent it on his obsessions. I endured 20 years of neglect. Yet the will leaves you everything. A bitter smile. Poetic justice, perhaps. I was in London last week. My solicitor can confirm. I returned yesterday by the 4:15 train. Your perfume, madame. Jasmine and myrrh. It lingers in the study, though you claim never to enter. I passed the door yesterday. Elias was alive then, ranting about curses. The scent clings to corridors in this house. Poirot studied her, and the phantom, a figment of his guilt. Elias ruined lives, Blackwood's career, Hale's future, Victoria's inheritance. He saw retribution in every shadow. Interviews complete, Poirot dismissed Hastings to fetch tea. Alone, he spread the clues across the desk like tarot cards. He closed his eyes, letting the little grey cells dance. At 3:17 p.m., Tommy burst in, cap askew. "Sir, the workshop. Someone's been in. Wood shavings everywhere, and the dagger. It's there, wrapped in oilcloth, blood still wet." Poirot followed him across the stable yard to a stone outbuilding. Inside, the air smelled of sawdust and turpentine. On the workbench lay the dagger, blade cleaned but hilt smeared. Beside it, a scrap of paper. The curse moves to the next bearer. Poirot examined the blade under a magnifying glass. A single strand of dark hair caught in the guard. Lady Victoria's colour. "Bag it," he instructed Japp. "And the oilcloth. Finger marks." Tommy pointed to the corner, a clear thumbprint in blood. Back in the library, Poirot gathered the household. Rain now lashed the windows, thunder growled over the Hertfordshire hills. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we approach the heart of the maze. The murder was no phantom's work, but a clever illusion. Consider gasps." Dr. Blackwood surged to his feet. "You're saying Elias staged his own haunting?" "Partly. Paranoia fed the legend, but the killer exploited it. Someone entered the bedroom after the professor locked himself in. How?" He paced. "The balcony. The window was open 6 inches. Enough for a thin wire, a loop, to turn the key after the murder. The bolt, however, is the puzzle. It cannot be thrown from outside." He paused dramatically. "Unless the bolt was never thrown." Hastings frowned. "But we saw it." "None. You saw the door locked with the key. The bolt was thrown after we broke in, by the killer, hiding in the wardrobe." The room erupted. Poirot raised a hand. "Proof!" The wardrobe lock was scratched, new marks. And inside, a man's handkerchief, monogrammed J.H., Jonathan Hale. Hale paled. I lost it days ago. Convenient. You entered via the balcony, stabbed the professor as he slept, locked the door, withdrew the key, hid in the wardrobe until we left. Then you threw the bolt, exited through the bedroom door, and relocked it from the corridor using a duplicate key, cast from wax perhaps in the workshop. Miss Cartwright sobbed. No, Jonathan wouldn't, but the footprints, Lady Victoria interrupted. They were size 10, Jonathan's, planted later by an accomplice. The mud on Miss Cartwright's feet. She met Hale in the arbour to establish his alibi. The hair on the dagger, hers, planted to mislead. Mrs. Thorne laughed, a cold sound. A pretty theory, monsieur. But the amulet, the notes, the amulet is the key. A fake, as Hale said, but valuable to the right buyer. The notes, some by the professor, some by the killer to sustain the phantom myth. He turned to Hale. You embezzled funds, yes, but the professor discovered the amulet's worthlessness. He threatened exposure. You killed him to silence him, and to sell the fake before the truth emerged. Hale lunged, but Hastings restrained him. Japp snapped on cuffs. As Hale was led away, Poirot addressed the room. The storm gathers, but the sky begins to clear. Yet one piece remains, the accomplice. Who carved the headboard? Who laid the false footprints? He looked at Miss Cartwright, tears streaming. Mademoiselle, your devotion blinded you. You helped him, believing it a prank to scare the professor into generosity. But murder? She collapsed, sobbing. He said no one would be hurt. The rain eased. In the sudden quiet, Poirot heard it, a soft scrape from the corridor. He signalled Japp. They crept out. In the shadows, Grimshaw stood by the study door, a crowbar in hand. He froze as Poirot's voice cut the silence. Non, mon ami, the game is up. The butler dropped the crowbar with a clang. I only meant to search for the professor's notes, proof he stole my life's work. Blackwood paid me to find them. Poirot sighed. Another thread in the web. Take him, Inspector. As Grimshaw was led away, Poirot returned to the library. The suspect sat stunned. Outside, the storm broke fully, rain drumming on the leads like impatient fingers. Hastings poured tea with shaking hands. Brilliant, Poirot. But the phantom, was it all Hale? Poirot sipped his tea, eyes distant. Hale killed, yes, but the phantom? Something lingers. The myrrh scent in the study this morning. Hale was in custody. Someone else walks these halls. He set down the cup. The gathering storm has passed, mon ami, but the hurricane is yet to come. In the workshop, unnoticed, a single crow feather lay on the floor, its tip freshly dipped in crimson. Chapter 4. Shadows and Deceptions. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke at 4 o'clock. A violent lashing downpour that turned the gravel paths to rivers and rattled every pane in Shadowbrook Manor. Lightning strobed through the library windows, freezing the room in stark white flashes. Bookshelves like prison bars, faces carved in fear and suspicion. Thunder followed, a cannonade that shook dust from the rafters. Poirot stood at the tall windows, hands clasped behind his back, watching the deluge. Behind him, the remaining suspects sat in a loose semicircle. Lady Victoria rigid with fury. Dr. Blackwood glowering, Mrs. Thorne serene as a statue, Miss Cartwright huddled in an armchair, eyes swollen from weeping. Constable Japp had taken Hale and Grimshaw to the local lock-up. The house felt suddenly too large, echoing with absence. Hastings closed the door with a soft click. Well, Poirot? Hale's confessed to the murder. Cartwright to helping stage the phantom nonsense. Case closed, eh? Poirot turned, his silhouette sharp against the stormlit glass. Closed? Non, mon ami. A door may slam, but the draft remains. Observe. He gestured to the coffee table where the clues lay under a bell jar like specimens. The crow feather, the red wool thread, the crimson-inked notes, the dagger wrapped in oilcloth, the headboard fragment with its carved warning. Hale stabbed the professor, yes. Miss Cartwright laid the false footprints, carved the message under his direction, but the amulet is still missing. The myrrh scent appeared in the study after Hale was in custody. And this, he lifted the crow feather with tweezers, fresh, placed in the workshop this afternoon while we interviewed in here. Dr. Blackwood snorted, "Servants' gossip, someone's having a laugh, or covering tracks," Lady Victoria snapped. "My uncle's collection was worth a fortune. With Hale gone, who benefits now?" Mrs. Thorne's voice cut like crystal. "I do. Everything. So accuse me, Monsieur Poirot. Be done with it." Poirot's smile was thin. "Accusations are for amateurs, madame. I deal in proof." He moved to the desk, opened a leather folio, and spread fresh telegraph flimsies. "From London, Lady Victoria. Your creditors have issued a warrant." "Dr. Blackwood, Cambridge revoked your fellowship this morning for plagiarism. Miss Cartwright, your sister in Devon died last year. The letters you claimed to write were to a fiction. Madam Thorne, your solicitor confirms you were not in London last week. You arrived by the midnight train, unseen, silence, broken only by rain." Poirot continued, "We have motives in abundance, money, revenge, freedom. But the method, that is what fascinates. A locked room, a phantom, an impossible theft. Let us reconstruct." He paced, ticking points on his fingers. Fact 1. Professor Thorne locked himself in at 10:15, key on the inside. Fact 2. He was stabbed between 11:45 and 12:15, dagger from the study. Fact 3. The amulet vanished from the study between midnight and 1 a.m. Fact 4. The bedroom door was bolted from within when we broke in. Yet the bolt cannot be thrown from outside. He stopped before Mrs. Thorne. "You, madam, possess a duplicate key to the bedroom, cast 3 months ago when you feigned losing yours." The locksmith in Hertford confirmed it. Her eyes flickered. "Elias was paranoid. I kept it for safety." "Safety," Poirot echoed, "or access. You entered at 11:50, stabbed your husband as he slept, exited, locked the door with the duplicate, and withdrew the original key using a wire loop beneath the door, practiced in the workshop. You then returned to your room via the servant's stair." "Preposterous," she said, but her voice wavered. "No, the myrrh, your perfume, madame, blended with Egyptian essence you ordered from Cairo last year. It lingered in the study because you took the amulet. You staged the phantom to cast suspicion on Hale, knowing his embezzlement made him vulnerable." Lady Victoria laughed, a brittle sound. "If Beatrice killed Elias, why the elaborate haunting? Why not a simple poisoning?" "Because," Poirot said, "the will has a morality clause. Murder by poison would void her inheritance. A phantom killer, external, supernatural, preserves the fortune. And the amulet? Insurance. A fake, yes, but to the right collector still worth thousands." Dr. Blackwood leaned forward. "Then where is it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, hidden in plain sight. "Observe the library globe, Hale's favourite prop." He spun the antique terrestrial globe. It opened on hidden hinges. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay the lapis scarab, its wings spread, glyphs glowing. Mrs. Thorne rose, magnificent in fury. "You have no proof! Au contraire!" Poirot produced a tiny glass vial. "Your lipstick, madame. Carmine and beeswax, matching the crimson ink. Found in the workshop waste bin. And this," he held up a single jasmine petal, bruised, "from the conservatory. You crushed it to mask the myrrh when you returned the dagger." Thunder crashed. Lightning illuminated the room. For an instant, Every face was a mask of guilt or terror. Poirot turned to Hastings. "The net closes, mon ami, but one thread remains, the crow feather placed today. Someone wishes us to believe the phantom lives." He rang the bell. Mrs. Wilkins entered, apron damp, eyes wide. "Madame Wilkins, you cleaned the workshop this morning?" "Yes, sir. Swept it thorough. No feather then. And you, Tommy?" The groundskeeper shuffled in, cap in hand. "I locked the shed at noon, sir. Keys on my belt." He displayed a heavy iron ring. Poirot nodded. Then the feather was placed between noon and 4, while we were all accounted for in the library. He moved to the French windows, flung them open, rain swept in, cold and clean. The garden lay sodden, topiary hunched like mourners. Lightning flashed again. And in that white glare, Poirot saw it, a figure in a hooded oilskin, crouched by the rose arbour, something glinting in its hand. Hastings, the revolver! They ran. Mud sucked at their shoes, rain blinded them. The figure fled toward the woods, cloak billowing like a sail. Hastings fired once into the air, crack, echoing like the storm. The figure stumbled, dropped something, vanished among the trees. They reached the arbour. On the ground lay a silver cigarette case, monogrammed R.B., Dr. Reginald Blackwood. Back in the library, soaked and grim, Poirot confronted the academic. "You followed us, Doctor." "Why?" Blackwood's beard dripped. I heard noises, thought to investigate. With a trowel?" Poirot held up the muddy tool, found beside the case. "You buried something in the rosebed. Hastings, fetch a spade." 10 minutes later, beneath the Charlotte Rampling Rose, Thorn's prize bloom, they unearthed a small tin box. Inside, the professor's research, notes annotated in Blackwood's hand proving the plagiarism, and a second amulet, genuine lapis, wings chipped, worth a king's ransom. Blackwood sank into a chair. "He stole my life's work. I wanted the proof and the real amulet. Thorn switched them years ago. I've been searching ever since." Poirot's voice was gentle. "So you staged the final phantom act to retrieve your property while we chased shadows." Blackwood nodded, defeated. Lady Victoria stared at the genuine scarab. "All this for a beetle?" "For legacy," Poirot corrected, "and for greed." He turned to Mrs. Thorne. "Your plan was flawless, madame, until vanity betrayed you. The lipstick, the jasmine, the duplicate key. You wished the world to see a phantom, not a murderer. But phantoms leave no scent." She met his gaze, proud to the last. "Prove it in court, little man. Oh, I shall." The wire loop, the wax impression, the workshop shavings, microscopic oak particles on your slippers, matching the headboard. Science, madame, is the true phantom that never sleeps. Constable Japp entered, flanked by 2 sergeants. "Mrs. Thorne, you're under arrest for the murder of Professor Elias Thorne. Dr. Blackwood, theft and conspiracy." As they were led away, Miss Cartwright wept silently. Lady Victoria lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. "And me, monsieur? Ruined, but alive." Poirot bowed. "Your debts are your own, madame, but perhaps a scandal averted is inheritance enough." Outside, the storm began to ease. Rain softened to a whisper. Clouds parted, revealing a slice of pale sky. Poirot stood on the terrace, breathing deep. Hastings joined him, offering a flask. "Brandy, old chap." Poirot accepted, sipped. "The shadows lift, Hastings, but tell me, did you notice the conservatory door? Unlatched, though Mrs. Wilkins swears she locked it at dusk." Hastings frowned. Another thief? Or a loose end? Poirot's eyes scanned the dripping garden. In the rose arbour, something glinted, glass perhaps or metal. He descended the steps, Hastings following. Beneath the arbour bench lay a small hand mirror, cracked, its silver back engraved, E.C., Eliza Cartwright. Poirot picked it up. She watched us dig. Why? Inside the glass, a reflection, not theirs, but a shadow moving behind the yew hedge. A child's shadow, small and swift. "Tommy," Hastings called. But the groundskeeper was in the kitchen, drinking cocoa. The shadow vanished. Poirot closed the mirror. Another phantom, perhaps. Or a secret this house is not yet ready to yield. They returned indoors. Fires were lit. Lamps glowed. Dinner was a subdued affair. Cold pheasant, silence. Afterward, Poirot gathered the staff in the servants' hall. "Mrs. Wilkins, you have served this family 30 years. What do you know of the professor's first wife?" The cook's hand stilled on her apron. "Miss Beatrice, you mean? Died in childbirth, they said. But the babe vanished. Some say sent to an orphanage, some say buried in the woods. The professor never spoke of it." Poirot nodded. "And the stored where? Conservatory, for the orchids." Miss Eliza tended them. In the conservatory, moonlight filtered through steamed glass. Orchids drooped, heavy with scent. On the potting bench, a bottle of myrrh essence, half empty. Beside it, a child's shoe print in the soil, size 3, fresh. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The phantom has a child's accomplice, or a child's ghost. Hastings shivered. "Dash it, Poirot. You're giving me the willies. Fear is the phantom's weapon, mon ami. We will lay it to rest." Upstairs, Poirot searched Miss Cartwright's room. In a locked drawer, a locket with a baby's curl, dark like Hale's, and a photograph, Thorne, younger, holding an infant. On the back, "Forgive me." E.C. He confronted her in the morning room. "The child, mademoiselle. Yours and the professor's," she crumpled, "born in secret. He paid for an adoption, then vanished the records. I kept the locket. When Hale promised to help me find him, I helped stage the haunting. But the child, Tommy's nephew, little Jamie, he saw things, hid in the walls, left the feather today, thinking it a game." Poirot sighed. Innocence twisted by adult greed. "The boy is safe, with his mother in the village. Ill fetch him." As dawn broke, pale and gold, Poirot stood in the entrance hall. The portrait seemed less menacing. The chandelier sparkled. Mrs. Thorne and Blackwood were gone. Hale and Grimshaw awaited trial. Miss Cartwright would face charges as accessory, but leniency for the child. Hastings yawned. "Case closed, then?" Poirot adjusted his tie. "For now. But Shadowbrook keeps its secrets. The real amulet goes to the museum, the fake to the police. The house, perhaps it will sleep." A motor car crunched on the gravel. The London train. Poirot collected his valise. At the door, he paused, looked back. In the shadows of the staircase, a small figure waved. Jamie, locket gleaming at his throat. Nib. Chapter 5. The Web Tightens. The sun that followed the storm was thin and pale, a convalescent light that barely warmed the stones of Shadowbrook Manor. Mist still clung to the hollows of the garden, and every leaf dripped like a slow tear. Inside, the house felt hollowed out. Mrs. Thorne, Dr. Blackwood, Jonathan Hale and Grimshaw gone to Hertford jail. Miss Cartwright confined to her room under Mrs. Wilkins' watchful eye. Lady Victoria pacing the morning room like a caged leopard. Only the staff remained, moving on silent feet, speaking in whispers. Poirot stood in the entrance hall, valise at his side, overcoat buttoned to the throat. The Rolls-Royce idled on the gravel, exhaust curling in the cold. Hastings hovered, anxious to be off. "Train leaves in 40 minutes, Poirot. We'll miss it if we dawdle." Poirot did not move. His gaze travelled the hall, the suits of armour now dull, the chandelier dimmed, the portrait staring with new accusation. One moment, mon ami. A loose thread snags the sleeve. He climbed the grand staircase slowly, hand trailing the banister. At the landing he paused, before the portrait of the woman in emerald silk. Beatrice Thorne, 20 years younger, eyes luminous with secrets. Poirot studied her a long moment, then continued to the east wing. The professor's bedroom door stood ajar, police tape fluttering. Inside, the bed had been stripped, the headboard removed for evidence. Only the faint outline of blood remained on the mattress, a rust-brown map of violence. Poirot knelt, examined the floorboards. Between two planks, something glinted, a sliver of lapis lazuli, no larger than a fingernail. He pried it free with a penknife. A fragment of the genuine amulet's wing. The break was fresh, the edges sharp. "Hastings!" he called softly. Hastings appeared, breathless. What now? This was not in the globe. Someone broke the real scarab after Blackwood buried it. Why? They descended to the library. Poirot reopened the globe. The velvet hollow was empty, but a faint blue dust coated the lining. Lapis particles. He sniffed. Myrrh, stronger than before. The conservatory, he said. The glass house steamed gently in the morning sun. Orchids drooped, heavy with scent. On the potting bench, the myrrh bottle, now 3/4 empty. Beside it, a child's clay whistle, painted with crude ravens. Poirot pocketed it. Mrs. Wilkins entered, arms full of kindling. "Begging pardon, sir, but the police said to leave things be." "Madame, the whistle, Jamie's?" She nodded, wary. "Found it in the orchid bed yesterday. Boys always sneaking in. Says the flowers talk to him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the myrrh, used for the plants? Professor's orders. Said it kept the moths off. Miss Eliza mixed it fresh every week." He thanked her and returned to the house. In the servants' hall, Tommy polished boots, humming tunelessly. "Tommy, the workshop key, on your belt, yes?" The groundskeeper patted the iron ring. "Never leaves me, sir, not since Mr. Grimshaw's arrest. Yet someone entered the workshop last night. The padlock was filed, not picked, marks fresh." Tommy paled. I checked at lockup. It were whole then." Poirot dismissed him and climbed to Miss Cartwright's room. She sat by the window, pale and composed, a letter half written on her lap. "Mademoiselle, the child, Jamie. He was in the house last night." She hesitated. "He slipped in after supper. Wanted to see the detective man. I sent him home by the kitchen door. At what hour? Near 10. Mrs. Wilkins gave him cake." Poirot studied the letter. "Addressed to Master James Thorne, the lodge, Much Haddam." The handwriting trembled. "You acknowledge him now?" Tears welled. Elias denied him to his dying day. But the boy is blood. I thought, with the professor gone, perhaps the estate. Poirot folded the letter gently. "Blood ties tighter than curses, mademoiselle, but blood also betrays." He left her weeping and sought Lady Victoria in the morning room. She stood at the window, cigarette burning forgotten between her fingers. "Monsieur Poirot, must you prolong this farce? My uncle is dead, his killer's caught. Let me bury him and be done. Your debts, madame, £50,000. The estate passes to Mrs. Thorne, now in jail. You inherit nothing. Unless," her eyes flashed, "unless the will is contested. Yes, I have solicitors. The morality clause requires proof of murder, which we have. But there is another clause, non? A contingency should both Thorns predecease their issue." She froze. Issue? There was no child. Poirot produced the locket photograph. Thorne with the infant. Jamie, illegitimate but acknowledged in a sealed codicil. Found this morning in the professor's safe, behind the false bottom. Lady Victoria crushed the cigarette in a crystal tray. The little bastard! Hell get everything! Unless the codicil is destroyed, or the child disappears." Her laugh was bitter. "You think I staged the phantom to kill a child? I'm in debt, not depraved. Yet you were in the conservatory last night. Mud on your slippers, orchid compost, and this," he held up the clay whistle, "found near the myrrh bottle. You gave it to Jamie to lure him." She paled. I bought it at the village fair. For my godson. Jamie must have taken it." Poirot's gaze was steady. "We shall ask him." They found the boy in the stables, feeding sugar to the carriage horses. 8 years old, dark curls, eyes too old for his face. He clutched the locket Poirot had seen in Miss Cartwright's drawer. "Jamie," Poirot said gently, "the whistle? Who gave it to you?" The boy looked at Lady Victoria, then away. "A lady. Said if I blew it in the big house, the raven would come and grant wishes." "What wishes?" "To make Grandpapa stop being angry. To let Mama come home." Poirot knelt. "And last night I blew it in the glass house. The raven came, tall, with shiny wings, gave me a blue stone and said, 'Keep it safe.' He opened his fist. A lapis fragment, matching the one from the bedroom floor." Lady Victoria gasped. "That, the real amulet, broken," Poirot finished. The raven took the larger piece. Jamie hid this fragment. The boy's lip trembled. "I didn't mean harm. The raven said Grandpapa was asleep forever. That I must be quiet." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "The raven, describe." "Tall, black cloak, smelled like Mama's flowers. Myrrh and jasmine, Mrs. Thorne's perfume." But Mrs. Thorne was in jail. Poirot stood. "Hastings, telephone Hertford. Confirm Madame Thorne's custody." The call took 10 minutes. Japp's voice crackled down the line. "Thorne, solid as a rock. Cell checked at 6 a.m., 9 a.m., noon, never left." Poirot hung up, puzzled. Then the raven is another. They searched the house again. In the attic, behind a trunk of moth-eaten theatrical costumes, they found a black academic gown. Hood lined with raven feathers, real ones, glossy and new. Beneath it, a bundle, the larger piece of the genuine amulet, wrapped in oilskin, and a bundle of crimson-inked notes, some in Thorne's hand, some in another, smaller, feminine. Hastings whistled. "Someone's been playing phantom dress-up." Poirot examined the notes. 1. Unfinished. The child must not inherit. View. Lady Victoria's initial. They confronted her in the drawing room. She listened, face pale, then laughed. "A broken sound. Yes, I wrote it, after I learned of the codicil. I thought to frighten the boy, make him run away, invalidate the claim. I took the gown from the attic, the feathers from the taxidermy raven in the study. I broke the amulet to plant fragments, sustain the haunting, but I never touched Elias. That was Beatrice." Poirot shook his head. "No, madam. Mrs. Thorne killed her husband, yes, but from inside the jail." He explained, "A duplicate key, smuggled in by Grimshaw before his arrest. Mrs. Thorne escaped at 2 a.m., returned by 4 a.m., the guards bribed with promises of the estate's spoils. She entered via the conservatory, met Jamie, gave him the fragment to hide, took the larger piece to sell. The myrrh masked her scent on the gown. Lady Victoria sank onto a chaise. Then Im ruined, unless, Poirot said softly, you testify. The codicil stands. Jamie inherits under trust. Your testimony reduces Mrs. Thorne's sentence. The estate pays your debts as gesture of mercy." She stared at the fire. "A devil's bargain, or justice," Poirot corrected. That afternoon, Jamie was reunited with Miss Cartwright, his mother in the village. The boy clutched the locket, eyes wide as the solicitor explained his future. Lady Victoria signed the testimony, hands steady now. At dusk, Poirot and Hastings boarded the train. The manor shrank behind them, windows glowing like watchful eyes. Hastings leaned back. "Case closed, then?" Phantom unmasked, inheritance settled. Poirot gazed at the passing fields. Closed? None? The web tightens always. Mrs. Thorne will hang or be transported. Blackwood loses everything. Hale rots in prison. Lady Victoria survives on charity. Miss Cartwright raises her son in reduced circumstances. And Jamie. He withdrew the clay whistle, turned it in his fingers. Jamie grows up with a fortune built on blood. Will he hear the raven still? Hastings shivered. You're in a dark mood, old chap. Poirot smiled, small and sad. Truth is often dark, mon ami, but light follows. The train rattled on, London bound. In Poirot's pocket, the lapis fragment glinted, a shard of curse, or perhaps of hope. At King's Cross, a telegram awaited, another locked room. Orient Express, come at once. Bianchi. Chapter 6. The Revelation. The fog that greeted Poirot and Hastings at King's Cross was not the gentle autumn mist of Hertfordshire, but a thick yellow-grey pall that tasted of coal smoke and river rot. It swallowed the station's iron ribs, muffled the porter's shouts, and turned every lamp-post into a sickly halo. Their taxicab crawled through streets where hansoms and motor cars loomed like ghosts, headlights dimmed to embers. Poirot sat forward, gloved hands on his cane, eyes bright despite the hour. Hastings yawned into his scarf. Orient Express, Venice, locked room sounds like one of your continental capers, Poirot. Who's this Bianchi fellow? Monsieur Pierre Bianchi, directeur of the Compagnie Internationale des Wagons-Lits. We met in 23, the business of the missing diplomat on the Calais coach. A man of precision, like myself. If he summons Hercule Poirot, the impossible has occurred. They reached Liverpool Street Station with minutes to spare. The Simplon Orient Express waited on platform 3, a serpent of midnight blue carriages gleaming under arc lights. Porters in pillbox hats scurried. Steam hissed like a dragon's breath. Bianchi himself, a slight dapper man with a waxed moustache and anxious eyes, met them at the sleeper car. Monsieur Poirot, grazie al cielo, the crime is impossibile. A passenger dead in a locked compartment, door chained from within, windows sealed, no weapon, no motive. The train left Milan at midnight. The body was found at dawn outside Venice. Come. He led them through the narrow corridor, past velvet curtains and polished rosewood. The compartment, number 7, was sealed with red tape. A Venetian carabiniere stood guard, rifle slung. Inside, the scene was pristine. A single berth made up, a leather valise on the rack, a half-empty bottle of Barolo on the fold-down table. The passenger lay on the floor, face down, arms outstretched as if in supplication. Signor Aldo Moretti, Bianchi said, art dealer Milan, travelled alone, booked this compartment for privacy. The conductor checked tickets at Domodossola, Moretti alive, reading Il Corriere. At Venice, the porter knocked, no answer. Dafford chained inside, key in the lock. They broke the chain. Dead 3 hours, the doctor says. Stabbed once, through the heart. No blade. Poirot knelt, examining the body without touching. Moretti was 60, elegant even in death. Charcoal suit, silk tie, gold cufflinks shaped like scarabs. A single wound, neat between the ribs. Blood had pooled beneath him, soaking the Persian rug. No weapon, no struggle. The chain on the door was intact, the key still in the lock on the inside. Windows latched, curtains drawn. The air smelled of wine, blood, and something sharper, myrrh. Tiens, Poirot murmured, the phantom follows us across continents. Hastings frowned. Phantom? You think Shadowbrook's curse? Non, non. Coincidence is the refuge of the lazy mind. Observe. He pointed to the table. The wine bottle's cork lay beside it, pierced by a silver corkscrew. 2 glasses, one clean, one with a lipstick smear. crimson as the ink at Shadowbrook. A woman visited, yet Moretti travelled alone. Bianchi produced a passenger manifest. Compartment 8, Signora Lucia Valenti, widow Venice. Compartment 6, Mr. James Rutherford, English antiquities dealer. Compartment 9, Dr. Elena Rossi, archaeologist. All claim no connection to Moretti. Poirot's eyes gleamed. We begin with them. And the scarab cufflinks, Egyptian, 18th dynasty. Moretti dealt in antiquities, perhaps a rival. They interviewed in the dining car, now empty save for white, tablecloths and the clink of crystal. Signora Valenti arrived first, a vision in black lace, veil lifted to reveal violet eyes and a mouth like a wound. She lit a cigarette with a gold lighter. Moretti? I met him once at an auction in Florence. He outbid me for a Canova sketch, Cippicato. But murder? I slept all night. The conductor brought me café latte at 7. Lipstick on the glass in compartment 7, Poirot said. Your shade? She smiled coldly. Revlon Raven Red. Half the women in Italy wear it. Next, James Rutherford, tall, ruddy tweed suit strained at the seams. He nursed a whiskey, voice booming. Moretti was a shark. Sold me a fake Ptolemaic coin last year. Cost me £5,000. I threatened to expose him, yes, but stab him on a train. I was in the club car till 2, playing cards with the American couple in compartment 3. Ask the steward. Dr. Elena Rossi entered last, small and intense. Dark hair pinned severely. She carried a leather folio of notes. Moretti stole my research on the Thoth amulet, published it as his own. I confronted him in Milan yesterday. He laughed, said the curse would silence me. I returned to my compartment at 11, worked until dawn. Poirot noted her hands ink-stained, a fresh scratch on the right thumb. The corkscrew in compartment 7. Yours? She hesitated. I lent it to the steward for dinner. He returned it at midnight. Bianchi confirmed. The corkscrew is standard issue. Each car has one. Poirot dismissed them, then examined the compartment again. The chain was heavy brass, the links intact. The key turned smoothly. He closed the door, chained it, locked it, then stood inside. The space was tiny. Berth, washbasin, table, no room to hide. He opened the window. It overlooked the tracks rushing past at 60 miles an hour. No ledge, no foothold. Hastings scratched his head. Impossible, Poirot. Door chained inside, windows sealed, no weapon. The killer vanished into thin air. No, killers are flesh, mon ami. Observe the ceiling, a small ventilation grate, screws loose. Poirot stood on the berth, pried it open. Inside, a narrow duct led to the roof. The train slows at Domodossola for customs. The killer entered here, stabbed Moretti, exited the same way, replaced the grate. The chain was fastened after death, by reaching through the grate with a wire loop, as at Shadowbrook. Is the weapon, removed after the murder, hidden in the duct. Poirot reached inside, fingers brushing metal. He withdrew the corkscrew, blade stained dark. The killer is among the 3. They gathered the suspects in the dining car as the train crossed the Venetian lagoon, causeway lights twinkling like fallen stars. Venice rose ahead, a mirage of domes and spires. Poirot stood at the head of the table, voice calm. Mesdames et messieurs, the murder of Signor Moretti was no phantom's work, but a clever illusion. The locked room, the missing weapon, the lipstick, all stage dressing. Let us reconstruct. He placed the corkscrew on the table. The killer entered via the ventilation duct at 1:15 a.m. when the train stopped at Domodossola. Moretti was asleep, wineglass in hand. One thrust, precise, through the heart. The corkscrew was withdrawn, hidden in the duct. The killer reached through the grate, unhooked the chain with a wire loop, practiced in Milan perhaps, then relocked the door and exited to the roof. The train moved on, the body undiscovered until Venice. Signora Valenti laughed. Absurd. The roof at speed? Suicide. Non. The train slows to 10 miles an hour on the causeway. The killer dropped to the tracks, walked to Venice Station, blended with the crowd. Rutherford snorted. And the motive? Poirot produced the scarab cufflinks. These are genuine, worth £10,000. Moretti planned to sell them in Venice, to Dr. Rossi's contact at the Museo Archeologico. She discovered the theft yesterday, confronted him. He refused to return them. She killed him to reclaim her reputation and the scarabs. Dr. Rossi surged to her feet. Lies! I was in my compartment, with the corkscrew you borrowed, your thumb scratch from the great screws, the lipstick planted in the glass to implicate Signora Valenti, who outbid you for the Canova, the myrrh on the blade, your perfume dottore, from the same Cairo supplier as Professor Thorne. He opened her folio. Inside, a draft article on the Thoth amulet, annotated in Moretti's hand, stolen, and a train timetable, Domodossola stop circled in red. Rossi collapsed, sobbing. He ruined me. The scarabs were my discovery. I had no choice. Bianchi signalled the carabiniere. As Rossi was led away, Poirot turned to the others. Signora Valenti, your alibi holds. Mr. Rutherford, yours also. The phantom was a woman scorned, not a ghost. The train pulled into Venezia Santa Lucia. Porters swarmed. Gulls wheeled overhead. Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the platform, the lagoon breeze sharp with salt. Hastings exhaled. Another locked room cracked. Poirot! But the myrrh. Thorne's curse following us? Poirot adjusted his hat. Coincidence, mon ami. Or the antiquities trade is smaller than we think. The scarabs returned to Dr. Rossi's university, under lock and key. They boarded a vaporetto to the Danieli. Venice shimmered, all gold and shadow. In Poirot's pocket, the lapis fragment from Shadowbrook pulsed like a heartbeat. That night, in a suite overlooking the Grand Canal, Poirot received a package. Brown paper, no return address. Inside, the missing half of the genuine Thoth amulet, wrapped in crimson ink note. Chapter 7. Justice Served. The vaporetto cut through the black water of the Grand Canal like a silver knife, its wake fracturing the moon into 1,000 trembling shards. Hercule Poirot stood at the prow, overcoat collar turned up against the night chill, his cane tapping a soft rhythm against the deck. Hastings huddled beside him, scarf wound tight, eyes fixed on the receding lights of Santa Lucia Station. "Dash it, Poirot," muttered. "We've barely stepped off one train and you're brooding again. Rossi in custody, Moretti's killer caught, the scarabs returned. Case closed. Why the long face?" Poirot did not answer at once. He watched a gondola glide past, its lantern swaying like a will-o'-the-wisp. The gondolier's song, low, mournful, echoed off the palazzi. Finally he spoke, voice soft as the lapping water. "Because, mon ami, justice is never a single thread. It is a tapestry, and every knot pulled tight leaves another loose. Dr. Rossi will hang, or be imprisoned for life. Signor Moretti is avenged. The scarabs return to their rightful owners. Yet the boy in Hertfordshire, Jamie, sends me half an amulet and a warning. The phantom does not die with its maker." Hastings shivered. "You think the child's in danger? None. I think the child is the danger. Innocence, twisted by blood and gold, becomes a sharper blade than any corkscrew." They disembarked at the Danieli's private jetty. The hotel's facade glowed rose and gold, a confection of arches and balconies. A liveried porter took their valises. Another led them through marble corridors scented with beeswax and orange blossom. Their suite overlooked the lagoon, San Giorgio Maggiore, a dark silhouette across the water, its campanile pricking the stars. Poirot refused supper. Instead, he spread the case files across a mahogany table. Photographs of Moretti's compartment, the blood-stained corkscrew, Ross's annotated article, the broken Thoth amulet, now whole again, the two halves fitted like a puzzle. The crimson-inked note from Jamie lay beside it, the child's careful capitals. The curse binds us all. J. Hastings poured brandy. Telegram from Bianchi. Rossi confessed everything. Planned it in Milan. Practiced the duct crawl on a freight car. Lipstick planted to frame Valenti. Myrrh to echo the Shadowbrook haunting. Thought it would confuse us. She's finished. Poirot sipped, eyes on the amulet. Finished, yes, but the echo remains. Myrrh from the same Cairo supplier. Thorne, Moretti, Rossi. A network of antiquities thieves, perhaps. Or a single hand moving the pieces. A knock. The porter delivered a second package, smaller, wrapped in oilskin, postmarked Venice. Poirot slit it open. Inside, a single raven feather, tip dipped in crimson, and a photograph. Jamie Thorne, standing before Shadowbrook's raven crest, eyes wide, locket gleaming at his throat. On the back, in Miss Cartwright's hand, he insists you keep this, says the raven watches. Poirot's moustache twitched. The boy plays a deeper game than we know. They slept little. At dawn, Poirot was at the telegraph office, wiring London, Hertford, Cambridge. Replies trickled in through the morning. Hastings read over his shoulder. Someone's tying loose ends. But who? Poirot folded the flimsies. We return to England. The web tightens at its source. They caught the afternoon ferry to the mainland, then the Simplon Orient Express westbound. The train was near empty. Off-season, the dining car hushed. Poirot spent the journey in their compartment, arranging clues like a general before battle. Hastings dozed, woke to find Poirot staring at the raven feather. Tell me, Hastings, what is justice? Eh? Well, punishment for the guilty, safety for the innocent. Eye for an eye, that sort of thing. Poirot shook his head. No, justice is order restored, but order is fragile. A child inherits a fortune built on murder. A widow hangs for passion. A scholar rots for ambition. The innocent suffer with the guilty. That is not justice. It is tragedy. The train crossed the Alps under a sky of iron. Snow lashed the windows. The carriage rocked like a cradle. At Calais, they boarded the boat train to Victoria. London greeted them with drizzle and the smell of wet soot. Whitehaven Mansions was warm. George Coco steaming. Poirot bathed, changed, then summoned a taxicab to Hertford Jail. A grim Victorian pile of blackened stone. The governor, a harassed man named Pritchard, met them at the gate. Thorns in the infirmary. Tried to hang herself with bedsheets. Guard cut her down in time. She's asking for you. Says she'll confess everything if you'll see the boy safe. They were led through iron corridors, the clang of doors echoing like gunshots. Mrs. Beatrice Thorne lay on a narrow cot, neck bruised purple, eyes sunken but defiant. A constable stood guard. Monsieur Poirot, she croaked. You were right. I killed Elias, planned it for months. The duplicate key, the wire loop, the phantom notes. I wrote them to terrify him into changing the will. When he added the codicil for the bastard, I acted. Poirot sat. And the real amulet? Sent to Venice. Moretti was my buyer. He double-crossed me, sold the research to Rossi. She killed him for it. I laughed when I heard. A bitter smile. The curse is real, little man. It devours us all. And Jamie? Her eyes softened. Keep him from it. The money, the house. Let Eliza raise him poor but honest. Burn Shadowbrook if you must. Poirot nodded. Your confession will spare the rope. Transportation, perhaps, for the boy. She closed her eyes. Tell him his grandmother was a monster. but she loved him in her way. They left her to the grey light. Outside, rain had stopped. A weak sun glinted on puddles. Hertford to Much Haddam was a short drive. The village lay quiet under bare oaks, the lodge a neat cottage with a smoking chimney. Miss Cartwright opened the door, aproned, eyes red-rimmed. Jamie peeked from behind her skirts. "Monsieur Poirot!" The boy ran forward, hugged his knees. "Did you catch the raven?" Poirot knelt. "The raven is caged, Petit, but you sent me the amulet. Why?" Jamie produced a crumpled drawing, crayon ravens circling a house in flames. "The house is angry, it wants to burn. Mama says we can live here now, but the money's cursed. I don't want it." Miss Cartwright knelt beside him. "The solicitors say he inherits everything. Shadowbrook, the investments, the London properties, millions. But I've refused the trust. Let Lady Victoria have the debts. Well, take the cottage and my pension." Poirot studied her. "And the locket?" She touched it. "Elias gave it to me the day Jamie was born. Said it was all the inheritance the boy would ever need, his father's love. I believe him now." Hastings cleared his throat. "What about the house?" Poirot stood. "We burn it. They drove to Shadowbrook at twilight." The manor loomed, windows dark, ivy clutching like desperate fingers. Tommy met them at the gate, cap in hand. "Place feels wrong, sir." Ever since the professor, things move, books fall, doors slam. Poirot handed him a petrol can. "Tonight, we end it." They worked quickly, furniture piled in the entrance hall, curtains soaked, the library's priceless tomes carried to the lawn. Lady Victoria arrived in a hired motor, face pale. "You're mad. The insurance will pay your debts," Poirot finished. "The estate is Jamie's. He refuses it. The house dies with the curse." She stared at the pyre. Centuries of history, wealth, blood, then nodded. "Burn it. Let the boy be free." Tommy struck the match. Flames leapt, orange and hungry, devouring oak and velvet. The raven crest above the door blistered, blackened, fell. Sparks rose into the night like fireflies. Jamie watched from the lawn, hand in Miss Cartwright's. When the roof collapsed in a roar of flame and ash, he whispered, "Goodbye, Grandpapa." Poirot stood apart, the Thoth amulet in his palm. The lapis glowed in the firelight, scarab wings spread, eyes of inlaid gold. He hurled it into the inferno. It vanished in a puff of blue dust. Hastings joined him. Justice served, then? Poirot watched the manor burn, centuries reduced to embers. Justice, mon ami, is ashes, but from ashes, new growth. They left at dawn. Shadowbrook was a ruin, smoke curling into a pale sky. The village would rebuild the lodge. Jamie would attend the grammar school. Miss Cartwright would teach piano. Lady Victoria sailed for New York. Debts settled, a new life anonymous. At Whitehaven Mansions, George served kippers and tea. Poirot opened the Morning Post. A single envelope, cream-laid, sealed with a child's wax raven. Inside, a crayon drawing. Poirot and Hastings standing before a cottage. Jamie waving, a single black bird flying away into a blue sky. Beneath, in careful letters, "Thank you for killing the phantom." Jamie Thorne, Poirot, pinned it above the mantel. Hastings grinned. "Case closed, old chap?" Poirot adjusted his tie, moustache immaculate. "For now, mon ami, but the little grey cells, they never rest." Another envelope awaits, another phantom knocks. Chapter 8. Loose Ends Tied. The ashes of Shadowbrook Manor cooled beneath a sky the colour of tarnished pewter. By the time Poirot and Hastings returned to London, the ruin had already begun its slow surrender to ivy and time. Newspapers carried the headline, "Mystery Mansion Raised in Blaze. Curse Ended. The article speculated arson, insurance fraud, even a final act of the Phantom itself. Poirot read it over breakfast at Whitehaven Mansions, folded the paper with a precise crease, and set it aside. George cleared the kippers. Post for you, sir. One from the country, one from abroad. Jamie starts school next week. He asked me to send you his first composition, my hero. He chose you. The cottage is snug, the piano tuned. Lady Victoria wired funds for the roof. Says it is the least she could do. We burn no more ravens. Thank you for giving us a future without shadows. Poirot's eyes softened. He pinned the essay beside Jamie's crayon drawing above the mantel. The second envelope was thinner, stamped Venezia, the wax seal a tiny gondola. Inside, a single sheet of hotel stationery from the Danieli. Monsieur, Dr. Rossi hanged herself in her cell last night. Left a confession. Full, unsparing. The scarabs are yours if you wish them. The museum declines. Mer returned to Cairo. The Orient Express runs on time. Grazie. Poirot placed the scarab cufflinks, Moretti's, into a velvet box. He would send them to Jamie one day, when the boy was old enough to understand legacy without curse. But loose ends remained. Poirot spent the morning at his desk, telegraphing, telephoning, arranging. By noon, a visitor arrived. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, rumpled and cheerful, a bulge in his pocket suggesting doughnuts. Thought you'd like to know, Poirot. Clean wrap-up at Hertford. Mrs. Thorne pleaded guilty. Transportation to Botany Bay, life. Blackwood got 10 years for theft. Hale, 5 for embezzlement. Grimshaw turned King's evidence. Walks free but banned from service. Cartwright's charge reduced to accessory after the fact. Suspended sentence. The boy inherits nothing but the cottage and a small trust from the insurance. Enough for school fees. Poirot nodded, and the workshop tools, the crimson ink, destroyed in the fire. But we found a ledger in the safe. Thorne's coded accounts. He'd been laundering antiquities through Moretti for years. Rossi was the last link, chains broken. Japp departed, leaving a sugar-dusted fingerprint on the blotter. Poirot wiped it away with a moue of distaste. That afternoon, they motored to Much Haddam. The village lay drowsy under late autumn sun, rooks wheeling above the church spire. The lodge cottage gleamed with fresh paint. A climbing rose, newly planted, twined the porch. Jamie burst out as the rolls crunched to a stop, school cap askew, cheeks flushed. Monsieur Poirot! Captain Hastings! Look, I've a bicycle! The machine was second-hand but shining. Ribbons on the handlebars. Miss Cartwright followed. Aproned, smiling shyly. Lady Victoria sent it, and this, she handed Poirot a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. From the ruin. Tommy salvaged it before the fire brigade arrived. Poirot unwrapped a charred silver frame. Inside, miraculously intact, a photograph. Professor Thorne, young, arm around a laughing woman, Miss Cartwright, 20 years younger, pregnant, radiant. On the back, in Thorne's, hand for E and our son. Forgive me. Miss Cartwright's eyes filled. He kept it in his study drawer. I thought it lost. Poirot returned it gently. Some ghosts are kind, mademoiselle. They took tea in the tiny parlour, scones, blackberry jam, a Victoria sponge baked by Mrs. Wilkins, now the village postmistress. Jamie chattered about school, football, the rook's nest in the oak. When he ran outside to show Hastings his bicycle tricks, Miss Cartwright leaned close. There's one more thing. In the ashes, Tommy found this. She placed a small object on the table. A child's signet ring. Gold, engraved with a tiny raven. It was Jamie's christening gift, from Elias. He buried it under the rose arbour the night of the murder, said it was to keep the raven quiet. Poirot turned the ring in his fingers. The gold was warm, the raven's eye a chip of onyx. He understood more than we knew. Hastings returned, grass-stained and grinning. Boy's a terror on two wheels. Reminds me of myself at that age. They departed at dusk. Jamie waved from the gate until the car turned the corner. In the rearview mirror, Poirot saw Miss Cartwright lift the boy into her arms, the cottage lamp glowing behind them like a promise. Back in London, Poirot spent the evening in his study, fire crackling, arranging the final pieces. He wrote letters. Keep the raven ring. Wear it when you are 16. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Study hard. Be kind. The phantom is ash. The future is yours. He sealed it with green wax, his monogram crisp. Hastings entered yawning. All tidy, then? Poirot surveyed the desk. Files closed, clues boxed, the mantle now bearing Jamie's essay, the photograph, the raven ring in a velvet case. Tidy, oui. But life is never tidy, mon ami. It is a garden. Some weeds remain. A knock at the door. George admitted a final visitor. Constable Japp again, this time with a parcel. Found this in the yard's post room. Addressed to you. No return. Thought you'd want it before it's logged. The parcel was small, wrapped in oilskin, smelling faintly of myrrh. Poirot slit it open. Inside, a single sheet of crimson-inked paper, the handwriting spidery, but unmistakable, Mrs. Thorne's from her jail cell. Beneath the note, a lock of dark hair, Jamie's curl, tied with black ribbon. Japp whistled. She's in isolation. How'd she send this? Poirot's face was grim. A guard bribed, or a confederate outside. The web tightened still. He burned the note in the hearth, watched the flames devour the crimson. The hair he placed in a small envelope, sealed, labelled, evidence, Thorne curse, 1927. Hastings poured whiskey. What now? Now we wait. The boy is safe, for now. But curses are patient. Weeks passed. London slid into winter. Frost on the Thames, carolers in Covent Garden. Poirot's moustache waxed against the cold. He took no new cases, content to prune his little grey cells with chess problems and the occasional tisane. One December morning, a letter arrived from Much Haddam. Jamie's handwriting, improved, dear Monsieur Poirot. Enclosed was a pressed rose, petals still vivid, thorns carefully removed. Poirot pinned it beside the essay. Hastings grinned. Boy's got spirit, like his old man, minus the villainy. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Blood will out, mon ami, but nurture shapes the blade. Christmas came. Jamie arrived on the 23rd, scrubbed and shining, a parcel under his arm. He presented it shyly. A hand-knitted scarf, green and gold, Miss Cartwright's work. For your cold London neck, sir. Poirot wrapped it around his throat with ceremony. Magnifique. We shall take tea at Fortnum's. Champagne for the captain. Chocolate eclairs for you. They spent the day at the British Museum. Jamie wide-eyed before the Elgin marbles, asking 1,000 questions. At the Egyptian wing, he paused before a display case. The Thoth amulet, restored. Wings spread under glass. Is that grandpapa's? Oui, but now it belongs to history. Jamie pressed a palm to the glass. It looked sleepy, not angry anymore. That night in Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot told him stories, not of murder, but of bravery. The little Belgian soldier who became a detective, the English captain who never flinched. Jamie fell asleep on the sofa, raven ring glinting on his finger. Poirot had given it to him that morning, resized by a Bond Street jeweller. Hastings carried the boy to the guest room. Poirot stood at the window, watching snow fall soft over London. Somewhere in the city, a raven croaked once, then was silent. On Christmas morning, Jamie woke them with a shout. On the mantel, beside the pressed rose, lay a new drawing. Poirot, Hastings, Jamie, and Miss Cartwright before a cottage. Above them, a single black bird flew toward a golden sun. Beneath, in careful letters, Poirot's eyes misted. He pinned it beside the others. Justice, he thought, was not punishment. It was this, a child's crayon sun, a pressed rose, a raven flying free. The loose ends were tied, not with rope, but with love. Chapter 9. Farewell to Shadowbrook snow had fallen thick over Hertfordshire by the time the new year turned, blanketing the blackened ribs of Shadowbrook Manor in a shroud as white and final as a funeral pall. The ruin stood at the end of the lane like a broken tooth. Its chimneys snapped, its windows blind sockets. Yet, even in death, the house drew the eye. Children dared each other to touch the gate. Lovers walked the perimeter at dusk, whispering of ghosts. The village had already begun to weave the manor into legend. The phantom professor, the cursed scarab, the detective who burned a fortune to save a child. Hercule Poirot returned on the 3rd of January, 1928. The Rolls-Royce purred to a stop where the gravel drive once began. Now, only a scorched track led through snowdrifts to the shell. Hastings climbed out first, breath pluming, boots crunching. Place looks smaller in daylight, he said, almost peaceful. Poirot surveyed the ruin, hands clasped behind, his back. Peace is earned, mon ami. Let us pay our respects. They walked the perimeter. The east wing had collapsed entirely, exposing the professor's study like a doll's house cut open, warped desk, iron safe split by heat, a single raven feather, charred but intact, caught in the debris. Poirot pocketed it without comment. At the rose arbour, now a tangle of frozen canes, Jamie's bicycle tracks crisscrossed the snow. A child's mitten lay abandoned, thumb worn through. Poirot lifted it, brushed off the frost and tucked it into his coat. Tommy emerged from the stables, now repurposed as a tool shed for the estate's liquidation. He touched his cap, eyes red-rimmed. Morning, sirs. Solicitors coming tomorrow to sign the land over to the county. Public park, they say. Reckon the boy won't mind. Poirot nodded, and the workshop, bulldozed last week. Nothing left but the concrete pad. Tommy hesitated. Found this, though. Thought you'd want it. He handed over a small tin box, rusted but intact. Inside, a child's diary, leather-bound, the raven crest embossed on the cover. Jamie's, begun the week of the murder. Poirot turned the pages with care. Entries in pencil, some smudged with tears. Oaked 28. Grandpapa locked the door again. Mama cried. I blew the whistle, but the raven didn't come. Noves 1. The lady in black gave me the blue stone. Said keep it secret, or the house will burn. The final entry dated yesterday. Poirot closed the diary. The boy buries the past as we buried the house. They followed Jamie's footprints to the foundation's heart, the entrance hall. Snow had drifted through the collapsed roof, forming a perfect white circle where the chandelier once hung. In the centre, a cairn of stones, the largest a chunk of manor limestone. Beneath it, wrapped in oilskin, they found a small bundle. The fake Thoth amulet, shattered, a lock of dark hair, Mrs. Thorne's, and a single page torn from the professor's ledger, listing payments to Moretti, Rossi, a Cairo supplier named Kepri Imports. Hastings whistled. The boy gathered the curse and buried it. Smart lad. Poirot replaced the bundle, rebuilt the cairn. Some secrets are safer underground. Miss Cartwright arrived at noon. Jamie in tow, cheeks pink from the cold. She carried a picnic hamper, sausage rolls, mince pies, a thermos of cocoa. They spread a blanket on the snow beside the ruin, and ate in silence, the only sound the crackle of the thermos lid and the distant caw of rooks. Jamie broke the quiet. Mamma says the house is gone, but the story stays. Will you tell it, Monsieur Poirot? When I'm big? Poirot ruffled the boy's hair. Stories are like seeds, Petit. They grow where they will, but I will tell you this. The phantom was never the house. It was fear. Fear of the past, fear of blood. You have buried it. Now plant roses. Jamie nodded solemnly. He produced a paper packet from his coat. Rose seeds, Rosa gallica, blood red. Together they dug a shallow trench in the snow, pressed the seeds into the frozen earth, covered them with the child's mitten as a marker. Spring will come, Miss Cartwright said, and with it, flowers. Lady Victoria's motor car arrived as they finished. She stepped out in sable and pearls, thinner than before, but her eyes were clear. New York didn't suit me, she announced. Too loud. I've taken a flat in Chelsea, near the river. The insurance paid the debts. The rest I gave to charity. Thought I'd say goodbye to the old pile. She surveyed the ruin, then the cairn. The boy's work. Oui, Poirot said. He buries what we could not. Lady Victoria knelt, pressed a gloved hand to the snow. Uncle Elias was a monster, but he was my monster. Ill plant a tree, something that outlives us all. They left her there, a dark figure against the white scattering seeds from her own packet, horse chestnut for strength. The drive back to London was quiet. Snow began to fall again, soft and deliberate, erasing footprints. At Whitehaven Mansions, George had laid a fire and a letter on the salver, thick cream paper, the raven crest now crossed out in red ink. The Transport Board commuted Mrs. Thorne's sentence to 10 years in a Tasmanian convent. She asked me to send this, her wedding ring, plain gold, no stone. Says give it to the boy when he marries. Let love be the only inheritance. She died in the night. Peacefully, they say. Poirot placed the ring in the velvet box with the scarab cufflinks. The circle closes. That evening he hosted a small dinner. Just Hastings Japp and Dr. Blackwood, released early for good behaviour, beard trimmed, eyes humbled. They ate roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, drank a decent claret. Conversation stayed light. Cricket, the new wireless sets, until Japp raised his glass. To loose ends tied, and to the little Belgian who ties them. Poirot inclined his head, to the boy who buried them. Later, alone, he opened the tin box from Tommy one last time. Beneath the diary lay a final surprise. A photograph, singed at the edges. Professor Thorne, Miss Cartwright and baby Jamie in the rose arbour, all three smiling. On the back, in Thorne's hand, my family, forgive me. Poirot pinned it beside Jamie's drawings. The mantle now told a story. Crime, fire, redemption, roses. Spring came early to Much Haddam. By April, the ruin was carpeted in green, wild garlic snowdrops, and the first brave shoots of Rosa gallica. Jamie's rose bush-bloomed first, a single crimson flower against the blackened stone. He picked it, pressed it between the pages of his diary, and posted it to London. Poirot received it on a morning bright with May sunshine. He placed the dried bloom in a crystal vase on his desk, beside the raven ring, now resized for a man's hand, waiting for Jamie's 16th birthday. Hastings found him there, staring at the flower. Thinking of the boy. Thinking of endings, Poirot said, and beginnings. The phantom is gone, Hastings, but the story, it lives. Chapter 10. Epilogue in the Fog. Autumn 1939. The fog that night was the colour of old pewter, thick enough to muffle the sirens and swallow the searchlights that stabbed across London's sky. Whitehaven Mansions stood dark, windows taped, curtains drawn, the city holding its breath before the storm. Yet, in apartment 203, a single lamp glowed behind blackout cloth, and the fire burned low but steady. Hercule Poirot sat in his wing chair, silk dressing gown immaculate, a small leather box open on the table beside him. Inside lay the objects of a decade-old case, a child's gold raven ring, a pressed crimson rose, a charred photograph, and a single lapis fragment that had once been part of a cursed scarab. He turned the ring between gloved fingers, the onyx eye catching the firelight. 11 years since the burning of Shadowbrook. 11 years since a boy buried a phantom beneath a cairn of stones and planted roses over the grave. A soft knock. George opened the door, ushering in a tall young man in RAF blue, greatcoat unbuttoned, cap tucked under one arm, dark curls tamed beneath regulation cut. Jamie Thorne, 19 years old, pilot officer, wings newly sewn above his breast pocket. His eyes, still too old for his face, found Poirot's and softened. "You came," Poirot said, rising. "I feared the fog would ground you. Flew in from Biggin Hill before the blackout. Couldn't miss your summons, sir." Jamie's voice carried the clipped vowels of public school and the faint lilt of Hertfordshire. He placed his cap on the sideboard beside Poirot's green wax seal. "Mama said you'd kept something for me." Poirot gestured to the chair opposite. George poured cocoa, real cocoa, hoarded since '38, then withdrew. The fire crackled. Somewhere far off an air raid siren wailed and faded. 11 years, Poirot began. "You were 8 when we met. Now you fly Spitfires over the channel. The world turns quickly." Jamie smiled, the same crooked smile from the Christmas photograph. "Mama still teaches piano in the village. The cottage roof leaks, but the roses, Rosa Gallica, climb the wall every summer. Red as blood, she says. Tommy's head gardener at the Duke's now. Sends us cuttings. Lady Victoria writes from New York. Sends dollars we can spend. And the ruin?" He hesitated. "They made it a memorial park. Planted an oak where the entrance hall was. Plaque says, 'Here stood Shadowbrook Manor, 1685-1927. Let truth burn brighter than fear.'" Poirot nodded. "And you, mon petit, you wear the ring." Jamie lifted his left hand. The raven ring glinted, resized again, now fitting a man's finger. "Never take it off. Mama says it's my compass. Points true north when the fog comes down." He reached into his greatcoat, produced a small parcel wrapped in oilskin. From the oak's roots. "Dug it up last leave. Thought you should see it before." He shrugged. The pilot's shrug that acknowledged tomorrow might not come. Poirot unwrapped the parcel. Inside, the fake Thoth amulet, reassembled with careful glue, wings crooked but whole, a lock of grey hair, Miss Cartwright's, now, and a folded sheet of wartime notepaper. Jamie's handwriting, firm and adult, to Monsieur Poirot. "The curse tried to follow me. Nightmares of burning houses, ravens in the cockpit. But every time I banked over the channel, the ring caught the sun and the dream broke. I fly for the boy who buried fear. If I don't come back, plant this under the oak. Let the roses keep growing. Your friend always." Poirot's eyes misted. He refolded the note, placed it beside the pressed rose, still vivid after 11 years. "Your mother? How is she?" "Strong. Teaches evacuee children now. Says music is the only blackout that never comes." Jamie sipped his cocoa. "She kept one secret. Told me last Christmas." He reached into his pocket, produced a plain gold wedding band. Mrs. Thorne's, grandmother Beatrice, died in Tasmania, 1935. The convent sent it back with a letter. Said she wore it every day, even in chains. Asked that it go to the boy who burned the curse. Poirot took the ring, turned it in the light. Inside, faint engraving, Ian B., 1902. He slipped it onto the chain beside his crucifix. "She loved, in her fashion," he said. as your grandfather did in his, twisted, yes, but love all the same. Jamie leaned forward. The fragment, the real scarab piece you kept. May I see it? Poirot opened the leather box, lifted the lapis shard. In the firelight, the hieroglyphs seemed to move. Life, protection, eternity. Jamie took it reverently, held it to the lamp. Histories, just stories we haven't finished telling, he said. Mamma says you taught me that. A silence fell, companionable. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. Somewhere over the North Sea, young men like Jamie flew into darkness. Ravens no longer of curse, but of duty. Poirot broke the quiet. You fly tomorrow? Dawn patrol. Jerry's been sniffing the estuary. Jamie's tone was matter-of-fact, but his knuckles whitened on the cocoa mug. Then tonight, we remember. Poirot rose, crossed to the mantel. He lifted the charred photograph. Thorn, Miss Cartwright, baby Jamie in the rose arbour. This is your inheritance, Jamie. Not gold, not land. This, a mother's courage, a detective's faith, a house that burned so a boy could live free. He placed the photograph in Jamie's hands. The young man traced his infant self, then his parents' faces, Elias stern, Eliza radiant. I used to hate him, Jamie whispered, Grandpapa, for what he did to Mamma, to me, but now, I pity him. He never knew what love could build. Poirot returned to his chair. And you, mon fils, you know. Jamie smiled, sudden and bright. I know enough to fight for it, for Mamma, for the village, for the roses. He stood, buttoned his greatcoat. Walk me to the door. They moved through the blackout curtain, George holding the torch low. In the corridor, Jamie paused. One last thing. He reached into his pocket, produced a small envelope from the oak, found it wedged in the roots, must have been there since the fire. Poirot opened it. Inside, a single raven feather tip dipped in crimson ink that had faded to rust. On the back, in Mrs. Thorne's spidery hand, written perhaps in her Tasmanian cell, Jamie saw Poirot's face. Grandmother. Oui, her last phantom. She sent it before she died. Knew the oak would keep it safe. Jamie took the feather, tucked it into his cap band. I'll carry it tomorrow. Let the raven fly with me. At the door, George handed Jamie his cap. The young man saluted, crisp, Auréf perfect. Thank you, sir, for the fire, for the roses, for teaching me curses end where courage begins. Poirot returned the salute, eyes bright. Fly true, Jamie Thorne. The little grey cells, they watch from below. The door closed. Footsteps receded down the corridor, swallowed by fog. Poirot stood a long moment, then returned to the fire. He added a log, watched the flames leap. George entered with a fresh pot. Will there be anything else, sir? Poirot settled into his chair. The raven ring now on his own finger. Jamie had slipped it there in farewell. Oui, George, a tisane. And opened the blackout curtain, just a crack. I would see the stars. The curtain parted. London's sky was clear above the fog, a river of diamonds. Somewhere over the channel, a Spitfire climbed into the night, raven feather in its pilot's cap, roses in its heart. Poirot raised his cup to the darkness. To endings, he murmured, and to beginnings. The fire settled into embers. The fog pressed close, but inside apartment 203, the lamp burned steady, and the story of Shadowbrook, phantom, fire, forgiveness, lived on in the quiet ticking of a clock, the scent of bergamot, and the courage of a boy who flew with ravens and came home to roses.